I think it's great to talk about love, but we also have to get down to the specifics of what it actually means, not just interpersonally, but politically. How do you create a society that we would call a loving society? Well, you have to create justice. You have to create peace. You have to have creative ways of engaging conflict that does not yield oppression.
Maybe this would be a good time to invite people down to talk about
sure.
our headquarters.
Sure.
Please visit the Veterans for Peace Western North Carolina Chapter 99 headquarters in the Phil Mechanic Studios, 109 Robert Street, in the River Arts District, one short block west of the Gray Eagle. It's staffed Tuesday through Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. We also have a phone there with an answering machine. You can call anytime. The phone number there is 258-1800. That's area code 828, of course, 258-1800. You are also invited to Stand for Peace with the War Resisters League of Asheville, Iraqi Veterans Against the War, Military Families Speak Out, and other peacemongers at the Veterans for Peace Peace Vigil each Tuesday from 4:30 to 5:30 at Pack Place, the intersection of Patton and Biltmore Avenues in downtown Asheville. Every Tuesday, come on out. You don't have to be a member of any of those groups. You just must be willing to stand in public for peace. That's all I have for now. So,
If you're just joining us, this is Kim Carlisle. I'm here with Dan Snyder tonight, and we're talking about nonviolence. Should we take another call?
Sure.
We're ready.
welcome to VFP TV and Radio Caller.
Yes, this is for Dr. Snyder. I hear among college professors and other people in my social set, because of the corruption of the political system in America, we need a revolution. And I'd like your ideas on what can the person, I'm actually your age also, so I've lived through the civil rights movement and all these assassinations we've had and all the activism in the 60s. And I feel very political. But anyway, I also am an artist and I do these different things as far as writing and cartooning. But in your mind, though, how would you see a revolution if a lot of us our age got together and started doing more? And also for the younger people, I'm going to hang up and let you talk about this. What are your ideas about a revolution for people that are aware now and want to do something?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, revolution is a is a very hot word for a lot of people because it typically gets associated to the idea of a violent revolution. Well, there can be a nonviolent revolution. In fact, I would argue that any thriving, vital, living democracy is thriving precisely because it's an ongoing revolutionary cycle. That whenever forces and institutions become oppressive to the point that the real voices of the people cannot be heard, then there needs to be a revolution. But we don't need to, to the people who are frightened by that word, maybe we can come up with some other words. But the point is that there's a constant tilling of the soil in a democracy. It's all about people power. It's all about people creating all kinds of new, thriving institutions that can be in place when the old encrusted ones begin to crumble. We see that in the church all the time. There's all kinds of interesting, creative things going in the church. Some aspects of the old church starting to fall apart. So I think that people like you, artists and writers, and teachers, are very much a part of all of this. There has to be what Gandhi called the constructive program, and that is the people who are constantly creating alternative institutions, constantly addressing needs in their community, and thereby participating in what I would call a revolution, even though it may not be the overt and dramatic kind a lot of us think of when we use that term.
I wanted to ask, and I think this follows on that a little bit, that we are veterans for peace, and we are not. There are a number of groups of veterans against particular wars. But we are veterans for peace. Yet, a lot of what we do is anti-war. So, how would you counsel a group of activists to work for peace instead of anti-war?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, because so many of us position ourselves in terms of what we're against rather than what we're for. And that's a difficult position, because if you're only against something, you're constantly engaged with that thing that you think is wrong, and you're not even considering what you're going to do when that organization or institution has been replaced. You have to have this constructive program. This is termed straight out of Gandhi's writing. You have to have creative alternative institutions. So for people who really want to see themselves as peace activists, as opposed to just anti-war activists, my recommendation would be study nonviolence. Study its dynamics, study its processes, its history, its strategies. And to that end, let me just make a plug here for some wonderful resources for viewers or listeners who are interested in learning more about this. I would highly recommend that you go online to the Albert Einstein Institution. The Institute is something else. The Albert Einstein Institution, which is Gene Sharp's organization, and there are lots and lots of wonderful resources and links that you can find on that website that will be a wonderful portal into learning more about nonviolence. And the other one is the International Center on Nonviolence, another website. You can Google that, and it will also link you to a lot of resources. So my recommendation is, if you want to see yourself as a peace activist, then learn the methods, the history, the dynamics, and the strategies of nonviolent social change.
So is that like, as I heard somebody, it was written, and somebody has said it, resist not evil. Is that kind of what you're saying? Don't resist war, but promote peace.
Absolutely.
Because if you're resisting something, you're actually propping it up.
Well, there is that, although the word resistance gets used in different ways, of course. But nonviolence isn't only one method. Alongside the constructive program, you do also have people who are engaged in what used to be called passive resistance. It's an unfortunate term because it's anything but passive. It's very active, but it's a kind of resistance that is not violent. And so there's a subtle distinction there. To oppose violence with violence does tend to escalate violence, obviously. To oppose violence, in other words, to resist violence with nonviolence, is a kind of jujitsu move. It really puts the whole thing on a different ground. I think Gandhi's campaign with the British in India is fascinating in this regard. The British pulled out all the stops. They had all the weaponry on their side, and yet they were defeated. Their guns simply could not get the job done. And you have to ask why that is. It wasn't because they were particularly nice people. They were perfectly happy to kill off people in order to maintain the empire. But they were undone by nonviolent political leverage that basically caused the collapse of that imperial system. And if you understand the political dynamics of that, you just have to sit back in awe of somebody like Gandhi, because this guy was a master strategist. And he also had this profound inward spirit where he understood a lot of these kind of spiritual principles.
So, speaking of the inward spirit, we touched on that a little bit before, that the true activists, practitioners, teachers of nonviolence come from a deeply spiritual place. Gandhi said, "Nonviolence is not a garment to be put on and put off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our very being."
Yes. Well, this is a classic Gandhi statement, of course, and it's the kind of thing that you would expect to hear from Gandhi, Thich Nhat Hanh, and others who are profoundly oriented toward this kind of inward spiritual ground out of which grows a nonviolent life.
And as the first caller said, it comes from a place of love.
Absolutely. And love, in turn, comes from a profoundly spiritual orientation. But just to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, let me just say again that not everybody is a Gandhian nonviolent activist.
Right.
If we could put that second chart up, it might be helpful, because I have a kind of a circle chart that shows an intersection of three circles. And on the left, the words up above are pacifism, nonviolence, and militarism. And I draw this chart this particular way because, first of all, it's important to make a distinction between pacifism and nonviolence. And also to make a distinction between principled nonviolence and pragmatic nonviolence. So this middle circle that I've labeled nonviolence is an intersecting point between people who support militarism and people who support pacifism. Normally you would think those people would be completely polarized, but they can actually join in this middle circle of nonviolence. Some will be entering that circle from an ethical, spiritually grounded position that I would call principled nonviolence. Others are entering that circle of nonviolence simply because of its pragmatic value. Nehru, who was a close ally of Gandhi's, was not pacifist. In fact, he advocated violent revolution against the British up until about 1928. And finally, he was convinced of Gandhi's position, but he was not convinced on the basis of Gandhi's spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
He was convinced because he saw the pragmatic value of it. Now, you and I are both Quakers. We might really want to emphasize the spiritual dimension of it, and you and I would agree on that. But I have kind of an agenda here, which is that I want to reach out to people who are unlike me, as well as people who are like me. And I just know that there are a lot of people out there who don't share my spiritual values or my theology, who nevertheless could be an important part of this nonviolent movement, because they get pulled into this circle on the pragmatic end of it.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's creating alliances, building bridges.
Absolutely. I don't want to tell somebody that they can't be part of a nonviolent movement because they're not talking in the same way I am about the inner life.
Uh-huh.
But on the other hand, I love to talk about the inner life.
Well, in a similar vein, I would like to invite folks to the monthly business meeting of the Veterans for Peace, the first Thursday of each month, starting at 6:30 at our headquarters in the Phil Mechanic Studios, 109 Robert Street in the River Arch District, one short block west of the Great Eagle. For more information about that, you may call 828-258-1800. That's the business meeting of the Veterans for Peace, Western North Carolina chapter, the first Thursday of each month. Keep up to date with the Veterans for Peace, Western North Carolina chapter 99 by visiting our blog spot. Our blog spot is VFP chapter 099 WNC.blogspot.com. Once again, that's VFP chapter 099 WNC.blogspot.com.
You know what we should do on that blog spot?
What's that?
Put up a schedule of VFP TV and radio shows. Who's going to be hosting and who the guests are going to be and what the topics are. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes, it would.
Let's work on that.
That requires planning.
Yeah.
Let's start the new year with that goal in mind.
All right.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
I like it. We sort of have a rotating guest host for the month for each show. So kind of fill in the blanks with some of the other information.
Well, If you're just joining us on VFP TV and radio, I'm Kim Carlisle, and here